Well, today I have a special guest, Gary Ferris. He is a graduate of our horticulture department here and certified arborist with Messenger's landscape, irrigation, and lawn service. Thanks for joining me today, Gary.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. You're going to show me some tree hazards that we commonly encounter in the landscape, and start here with this oak tree.
All right. Well, first of all, one thing that I noticed when I look at this oak tree from, say, across the street, across the lawn, is I noticed that it appears that there's a little too much mulch up on the trunk tissue.
Okay.
So I came to investigate, and I just knelt down, very simply pulled back the mulch. And I noticed that we have trunk tissue here, and the bark is discolored. And so I know that trunk tissue will rot when kept moist over a long period of time. So I know that that is a very potential problem. As I continued to pull the mulch back on all sides of the tree to uncover what I call the root flare, that's what we want to see from a distance. We want to see that root flare so we know that it's at the right level. We discovered a couple of girdling roots, and a girdling root is a root that is growing perpendicular to the trunk as opposed to radially away from the trunk. And this is a real problem, and a very common problem at that in today's landscape. If you look at this side of the tree, you notice a good flare. You look at this side of the tree, you notice a very flat spot.
Sure.
This flat spot is caused by this root putting pressure against the trunk of this tree and not allowing this trunk to gain girth as it should. That's going to cause some long-term problems. Problems including death of this section of the trunk. It can cause dieback on the top. And overall, this is a very young tree. This tree wants to be 36, 40 inches diameter at maturity. It wants to be 60, 70 feet tall. This root alone is going to cause that to not happen.
So what can we do about this root to correct the situation?
Well, that root can easily be removed. And we can do that with some simple hand pruners. You can get around here.
I'm going to just pull back the soil a little so
it's good to excavate, and it is good to find out where the root originates. And we see that actually goes quite a ways back into this soil and quite a ways around the tree, and we can see that this area right here is kind of flat. So what I want to do is I want to come out here and cut the root. That gives me a little leverage. Pull it away.
Oh yeah.
You see how far this root goes?
It's going all the way around.
Almost
here.
all the way around. It looks like the root originates right down in here and just came up through the excess mulch, took the path of least resistance, and went right by that trunk.
So what else can cause girdling roots in addition to too much mulch around the tree?
Planting too deep. That can happen either by a homeowner, that can happen by a professional. It can happen from just the nursery adding too much soil to the top of the ball before they do the ball and burlap situation. It rarely happens with container plants, but it can happen. I've even seen where it's happened with bare root nursery stock. Don't ask me how that came about, but it did happen. I've seen the photographic evidence. But if you plant too deep, you get the same results as too much mulch. That root tissue that originates from that trunk tissue, it's called adventitious roots again. It takes a path of least resistance because they're weak roots, and they go right next to the trunk and girdle the trunk. So
when we get a balled and burlap tree from the nursery, we shouldn't assume that the soil level is proper, but we want to pull the soil away. And
yeah, absolutely. You should never assume. I've seen too many times where trees have come straight from the nursery, straight into the ground, and the thought has been soil level of the ball, that's the soil level in the landscape.
Okay.
That's just not true anymore.
So we want to look for the flare.
You've got to look for the flare.
And make sure that we set our tree at that depth.
To be positive that you're planting the tree properly, you've got to look for that flare.
Okay, let's take a look at some other trees.
sounds great.
Okay, here we have a nice mature sycamore. Can you tell me what's going on with this tree here?
Well, with this tree, we noticed as we walked up, there's a couple of really large dead limbs. And so this whole time that we spend looking up, we see these limbs and we look around and we see, you know, that there are targets. There's cars parked around, there's a driveway here, there's a street where people walk. So, you know, in order to have a hazard, you have to have a target. You know, this tree out in the woods, not a big deal.
Right.
This tree in an urban environment is a big deal. It's a liability issue and all that. We need to look down. We need to look at what is causing these limbs to die off, especially these major limbs of an otherwise healthy tree. So we look down and we see a driveway, we see where a soil grade used to be, and a very real compacted area, and we notice that, you know, a car is parked off at the driveway, so we can pretty much deduce that there's a lot of compaction going on here and has been for a long time. So when we know that, at least with sycamores, your roots on one side of the tree relate directly to the limbs on that side of the tree.
Okay.
You've got damage in the roots, you see the results in the canopy.
Okay, so what would we do to correct this situation here?
There are a couple of things that we can do. One is not park on the root system.
Sure.
That's a given. Second of all, action really needs to be taken in this situation. These limbs need to be removed.
Here's a tree that's really posing a lot of risks here. You want to just tell me a little bit about what's going on?
Well, first of all, we have a home. We have a dead tree. We have cable TV, phone lines, just as easily could be power lines. Certainly they're electrified, so you have that danger of electricity. The tree's been dead for a long time. The roots are rotting away as we speak, so how sturdy is this tree? We just don't know. We do know that the tree is susceptible to falling over. Which way it falls over determines how much damage it does, and who's going to determine that? So if it falls in the house, it damages the house. If it falls in the power lines, it can create not only a dangerous electrical situation, but you know, cut out either phone, TV, you know, power for a neighborhood. So you look at the tree and you say, "Wow, that's got to come down." There's really no other choice in this situation other than complete removal.
Now, while we were walking over here, we noticed a tree that you've seen for several years. It's staked.
Well, you had asked me about that tree, and we know that that tree has been staked for at least 4 years since it was planted, and the caretaker has been moving the stakes and moving the straps, but for no good reason. Really, 1 year is what we want to see with a staked tree. We don't need to see the stakes on a tree longer than 1 year. When you do leave the stakes on, not only can you girdle the tree and waste all that time growing a nice tree, but it also reduces the tree's ability to establish itself in the soil and establish girth and strength in the trunk.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
It's been my pleasure.